The night was as quiet as ever. Every corner of the house seemed wrapped in silence, as though the place had been asleep for years. Moonlight slipped gently through the window, filling the room with a cold, silver glow. It was one of those nights when a person doesn't want to think too much, when all you want is to escape your own thoughts. But that night, his escape would lead him straight into a truth he could never have imagined. Exhausted, he made his way toward the bathroom. The light was dim, and the cracked tiles on the walls seemed to whisper old, forgotten stories. His footsteps echoed louder than usual in the stillness of the house. The bathroom door stood half open, and from inside came the faint sound of water rippling softly. At first, he thought maybe he had left the tap running, but then his heartbeat quickened. There was no one else in the house. He pushed the door open further, slowly, carefully. His eyes fell straight onto the bathtub, and he froze. Someone was sitting inside, but not just anyone. Her skin was blue, deep luminous, as though carved from the depths of the ocean itself. Drops of water slid over her body and shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Her ears were pointed, her eyes gleamed green like precious emeralds, and her face looked like it didn't belong to this world at all. Beautiful, yes, but not human. She clutched a white cloth tightly in her hand, as if trying to shield herself, or maybe hide a secret that could not be spoken. But her eyes, those eyes, were the most unsettling thing of all. They stared directly into him, silent yet filled with stories. He saw fear in them, but also a calm mystery, something that pulled him closer instead of driving him away. He staggered back a step, his heart pounding like a drum. 1,000 questions stormed his mind. Who is she? How did she get here? Is this real? Am I dreaming? But no, he could hear his own breathing, the faint rippling of the water, the chill in the air. Nothing about this moment was a dream. Almost against his will, his feet carried him closer to the tub. The nearer he came, the heavier the air felt, as though the room itself had shifted into another reality. She remained silent, watching him intently. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes seemed to whisper, "Don't be afraid." He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. Somewhere deep inside, fear clawed at him, warning him to run. And yet another force, invisible and irresistible, pulled him toward her. It was as though some unseen thread had bound them together, weaving their fates in this very moment. This wasn't an ordinary night. This wasn't an ordinary encounter. This was the beginning of something far greater, something that would alter every choice, every belief, every heartbeat from this moment on. Because the girl in the bathtub wasn't human, and her story had only just begun. He stood frozen, staring at the strange figure before him. The silence between them pressed heavily against his chest, making it harder to breathe. The girl in the bathtub didn't move, didn't speak. She simply watched him, her emerald green eyes shimmering like fragments of another world. Up close, her details were impossible to ignore. Her skin, though soft and smooth, carried faint markings across her arms and shoulders, delicate lines that glowed faintly as though inked by light itself. They weren't scars, nor tattoos as humans knew them. They looked ancient, purposeful, like symbols from a forgotten language. Her ears, pointed and sharp, twitched slightly at every sound. The dripping tap, the creak of the floor beneath his feet, the restless beating of his own heart. She wasn't afraid. If anything, she seemed to be studying him with the same curiosity that overwhelmed him. Who was she? He opened his mouth to speak, but the words clung stubbornly to his throat. What could he even say? "What are you?" That seemed cruel. "Where did you come from?" sounded absurd. Every question seemed too small for the enormity of what he was witnessing. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head slightly, her wet hair falling like strands of silver-blue silk around her face. She didn't answer. Instead, her gaze softened, almost sympathetic, as though she understood his confusion but could not, or would not, explain. He stepped closer, his fear slowly being replaced by fascination. The closer he came, the more he felt it, an aura radiating from her, an energy that was both foreign and strangely familiar. It was like standing at the edge of the ocean, staring into endless depths. Terrifying yet breathtaking. A thought flashed through his mind. She doesn't belong here. But then another thought followed. Why here, then? Why now? He wanted to believe she was harmless, yet there was no denying the unease crawling up his spine. Every instinct told him this moment was dangerous, not because she intended harm, but because she represented something far bigger than him, something he couldn't control or even comprehend. Her silence was unbearable. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered, though his own voice trembled with uncertainty. For a moment, her lips parted. No sound came, only the faintest sigh that seemed to ripple through the air like a breeze. And in that instant, he realized maybe she couldn't speak his language. Maybe her silence wasn't choice, but limitation. Still, the look in her eyes spoke volumes. They weren't the eyes of a creature lost or broken. They were the eyes of someone carrying a secret, a burden far heavier than she could reveal. And suddenly he felt it, the undeniable weight of destiny pressing down on him. This wasn't an accident. She hadn't just appeared here by chance. The girl in the bathtub was not a stranger to his story. She was the beginning of it. For a long moment, the bathroom felt like a world sealed away from time. The air was heavy, thick with silence, yet charged with something invisible, like electricity before a storm. He stood only a few steps away from her now, close enough to see the subtle shimmer of her markings, close enough to feel the weight of her gaze pressing against him. She hadn't said a word, and yet it didn't feel like silence. It felt like a conversation, unspoken, untranslatable, but deeply real. Her eyes didn't leave his, and the longer he looked, the stronger the pull became. Fear still flickered in the back of his mind, whispering that he should leave, that this encounter could unravel everything he knew. But stronger than fear was an unfamiliar sense of recognition, as if some part of him had been waiting for her, without even knowing it. He tried again, softer this time. "Can you understand me?" No answer, only a small tilt of her head, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was listening, not to his words, but to his voice, the rhythm of his breath, the tremor in his chest. It was as though she was learning him, piece by piece, not with language, but with presence. The connection deepened in the stillness. He realized her silence wasn't empty, it was full of things she couldn't express, or perhaps didn't need to. He felt it in the pit of his stomach, a subtle but undeniable bond weaving itself between them. And then, without warning, something shifted. Her hand moved slowly, cautiously, emerging from the water. Droplets slid down her blue skin, glinting in the dim light. She raised her hand, just slightly, stopping midway, as if asking permission. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't fear. It was a gesture. For reasons he couldn't explain, he lifted his own hand in response. His fingers trembled as they hovered closer, the space between them humming with unseen energy. When they finally met, skin against skin, it was like touching lightning wrapped in warmth. A rush of sensation surged through him. Not pain, not fear, but a flood of emotions not entirely his own. Images flashed in his mind, strange landscapes, stars scattered across foreign skies, fragments of memories that couldn't possibly belong to him. His knees weakened under the weight of it. He pulled his hand back, gasping, heart racing as if he had run miles. She watched him closely, her expression unreadable, though her eyes now carried a softness that hadn't been there before. She had shared something with him, something wordless yet undeniable. It wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a link. Whatever she was, wherever she had come from, their worlds had collided in that touch. And even without words, even without understanding, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could never walk away from her now, because in that silence, in that single touch, their fates had become bound together, and neither of them would ever be the same again. His hand still tingled where her skin had touched his. That single moment had left him shaken, as though part of him now belonged to something far beyond his understanding. He pulled back slightly, struggling to catch his breath, while she remained perfectly still, watching him, waiting. The silence was no longer empty. It was charged, heavy with a question neither of them had spoken aloud. What happens next? A storm of thoughts raged in his mind. Logic screamed at him. This is wrong. She doesn't belong here. She could be dangerous. Run. Call someone. Do anything, just don't stay. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, whispered, "If you leave now, you'll never forgive yourself. She needs you. This moment chose you." He stood caught between the two. Her eyes didn't waver. They weren't pleading, but there was something in them, a depth, a quiet desperation, that struck him harder than any words could. She was not attacking. She was not threatening. She was simply waiting, waiting for him to decide what she would mean to his world. Slowly, he crouched beside the tub, bringing himself closer to her level. His voice was low, uncertain, but steady enough to bridge the fragile gap between them. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. But if you're here, there must be a reason." She blinked, tilting her head slightly. That small motion carried more weight than any spoken reply. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't confirming it. But something about her stillness told him she understood. His pulse hammered in his ears. If he chose to trust her, he was opening himself to danger, to the unknown. If he chose fear, if he walked away, he might protect himself. But at what cost? Something inside him screamed that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about destiny. The tension thickened as the seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, she moved again. This time, she pressed a hand lightly against her chest, then extended it outward toward him. A gesture so simple, yet unmistakable. An offering, an invitation. His breath caught. It wasn't just trust she was asking for. It was a choice. His heart raced. Could he do this? Could he step into a world he didn't understand, with someone he couldn't explain? Fear clawed at his ribs, demanding he retreat. But the quiet voice inside him grew stronger, pushing back with a conviction he didn't know he had. If you turn away now, you'll never know what she truly is or who you might become because of her. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. And then, trembling but resolute, he placed his hand over hers. The bathroom seemed to shift around them. The hum of energy between their palms deepened, resonating like the opening note of a song yet to be sung. She closed her eyes briefly, as if in relief, and for the first time since he had found her, the faintest curve of a smile touched her lips. The choice had been made, not fear, trust, and with that single decision, his life no longer belonged to the ordinary world he had known. The touch lingered, binding them together in a fragile yet unbreakable thread. His hand rested against hers, and in that quiet exchange, something shifted, not just in the room, but in him. The ordinary life he had carried until this night had already slipped from his grasp. What remained was uncertainty, yes, but also a spark he could not ignore. When she opened her eyes again, they no longer looked distant. They looked alive, almost relieved, as though she had been waiting for this moment longer than he could imagine. Her faint smile flickered, And though no words were spoken, he understood it. A pact had been made. The silence broke, not with sound, but with a presence. The air itself seemed to hum, low and steady, like a current flowing between them. He didn't know if it was her doing or his imagination, but he felt it, the beginning of something larger than himself. He finally withdrew his hand slowly, gently, afraid the connection might vanish the moment contact was broken. But it didn't. The bond remained, invisible yet undeniable. She straightened slightly in the bathtub, as though gathering strength, her gaze never leaving his. A shiver ran down his spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. He could almost hear his own thoughts forming into a promise. I won't leave you. Not now. For the first time, he noticed how small, almost vulnerable she seemed, wrapped in water and shadows. She wasn't some untouchable goddess, nor a monster from his nightmares. She was something else, someone caught between worlds, stranded in his, and somehow, fate had chosen him to find her. The weight of that responsibility pressed against him. But instead of breaking him, it steadied him. He had a choice, yes, but now it no longer felt like a question of trust or fear. It felt like destiny had already answered for him. He stood slowly, his breath still uneven, and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." He wasn't sure if she understood, but the way her eyes softened told him she did. The night no longer felt ordinary. Every sound, every shadow, carried new meaning. The cracked tiles on the wall, the dripping faucet, even the faint hum of the city outside. It all seemed different, transformed. Because now, everything was measured against the impossible reality standing before him. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was just the beginning. Questions still swirled without answers. Who was she? Why had she come? What danger followed her? But he also knew those answers wouldn't come tonight. Tonight was about the first step, the choice, the silent vow between them. And as he turned to look back at her one last time, before leaving the bathroom, he felt the truth settle into him like fire in his chest. His old life had ended the moment he opened that door. What lay ahead was unknown, filled with danger, wonder, and secrets too vast to imagine. But it was no longer his journey alone. It was theirs.